Hi, everybody. I'm Pam Torrey. I'm the Director of Marketing here at Ingage. I've been here for a little over 5.5 years. I love doing our webinars. I get to talk to all of my favorite people who are our partners, and I'm very excited to have one of those people here today. I don't have his other half, but I have half of the dream team from 1&Fund. So Justin, would you like to introduce yourself to our audience?
I would love to. Thank you, Pam. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Yes, the other half, my better half, is not here, but so you're stuck with me, so I apologize ahead of time. Justin Hatcher, president co-founder of 1&Fund. Recently, we just merged with One Click Contractor. But I do come from the trade. So I started off holding a bag, sitting in front of Mr. and Mrs. Jones' kitchen table, helped grew a lot of home improvement businesses, and I saw a need to fix the home improvement lending space. So with my beautiful bride, Jennifer, her and I co-founded 1&Fund. So quick overview of 1&Fund, it's a multi-lender single application platform that will help you solve all your finance needs in the home.
Well, I'm so happy to have you here today, Justin. Before we dive into the meat of the conversation, I do want to let people know who maybe come from our partners mailing lists and have never met Ingage before, what we do and why we actually brought 1&Fund here to talk about this, like where we fit in the home improvement process. So we are the industry-leading sales enablement presentation platform for home improvement and home services. So what that means is that we help you to create dynamic, interactive, engaging sales content that leverages things like buttons and native video. We help you to share it out with everybody who needs it through our cloud-based platform, ensuring everyone is using the same version of the presentation at all times. And we help you to measure the impact of that content and then coach every rep to become your best rep with our rich analytics. So we are a platform that is used at the kitchen table. We are one of the core pieces of the tech stack in this industry. And so we sit side by side with 1&Fund. They are our premier finance partner. We work with them to help our customers be able to offer financing. And one of the biggest questions that we get asked is like, how do I do this? What should I be using? I don't even know where to begin with financing. And so that's why we brought 1&Fund here. So Justin, I know you gave like the one sentence overview, but can you talk a little bit more about what 1&Fund actually is so that folks understand kind of why we brought 1&Fund into this conversation and how you fit into the space?
Yeah, for sure. So at the core, what 1&Fund is going to do for your business is we are going to make you more profitable. So there's a couple of different ways how we can do that. The first way you want to look at us is we're a big buying group, right? So we work with, hundreds of thousands of contractors nationwide. So with that, I negotiate with lenders on how to get the best pricing for our entire group. So instead of you going on your own and trying to negotiate a deal with a lender, we're a big group that does that. So we have a lot more buying power than a single contractor does. So that's part one. Part two is going to be our platform, which obviously lives inside Ingage and speaks really well with the Ingage. And so with that, I know I touched on it. So really what it is, we're going to be your sales rep's best friend. So we're going to have one application. It's going to come into our algorithm, and we're going to match the customer up with the right lender the first time. So what's big about that is the traditional way is you go to lender A, maybe that's not approved. So then it's very uncomfortable for both the sales rep and the customer. So instead of having that uncomfortable conversation where you get a bunch of declines to eventually get an approval, our platform is going to get that approval the first time. So you and or your customer don't have that uncomfortable conversation. So that front end process is the same no matter what. And then the nice thing on the back end, you don't have to go to all those different lender sites to pull your funds or anything like that. Everything is housed inside of our platform. So we've streamlined your sales rep and your accounting team's overall process. And the last thing, thirdly is, like I said before, I did come from the home improvement space, and a lot of our team has come from the home improvement space. So that level of training we can provide you is really huge, because not only we can speak your language, we can help say, hey, we've tried that before, it didn't work. We found out this method works a little bit better. Now, we're not here to blow up your model, your sales model, anything like that. We're just here to be an extension to you and your team.
So, speaking of all of that industry expertise, I know your team very well. You have a very deep bench of industry expertise, a lot of knowledge there. Let's talk about assessing the financial health of a business, understanding just how do I figure out where I am today? Like I said, this is a topic about which I know nothing, which makes me very excited for this content because as I said, we have so many customers who come to us who are like, I don't really know how to include this into my talk track. We do price conditioning for the overall cost of the project, but we don't know how to do all of this stuff with financing. Where do I mix it into my presentation? And I'm like, okay, we can give you some best practices on that, but how do you even know what options you need to have? How do you figure out the state of your business so that you can layer in these other tools? So that's why we wanted to have you on today, Justin, to help out with just figuring out where are we today so that we can make changes to get to where we want to be. So can you walk us through this diagnostic assessment that you've put together?
Yeah. I'm actually curious how this works too myself. I'm just
That would be dangerous if neither one of
right.
us knew what was going
Yeah.
on. That would be a
Right.
very scary situation for
I mean, it could
everybody.
make it interesting too. Maybe we just flip cards up or no, I'm just kidding. All right. So first and foremost, when it comes to financing, it's not a field of dreams. If you build it, they will come. Maybe there's a little bit of that in there. There is some strategy that goes into it. It's not a strategy session that you need to sit in a room with your team for hours upon hours. There actually is a very easy, simple method to do. And these questions, some of these questions I'm going to ask, I really want everybody listening to just think about them and answer them and just be honest with yourselves. This is not hard. It's very simple. We're here to help you out. My team is, so just I want to set the stage there. First and foremost, it's very hard to talk financing if you're not marketing for financing. So question number one, are you marketing for financing? Now, that's going to do two things for your business. The first one is when you're advertising financing options, whether you're doing print ads, internet, whatever, wherever you're advertising, it's going to get people interested in the product and want to set a lead. Not because it's your ad, that has something to do with it, but it's if you're advertising, hey, no payments until 2026, or payments as low as XYZ. So that could get somebody who is maybe thinking about doing it. They're like, oh, I don't have to pay for it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm interested now, right? Maybe I don't do it right away, but now I'm interested at least to have you come out to my home. And that's the name of the game with leads, right? You just want to get in front of Mr. and Mrs. Jones. So first thing that's going to do is going to help get leads. Mm-hmm. The second thing is by advertising it, you're planting a seed in that consumer's head. So when if you're still running leads or your sales team comes and meets with Mr. and Mrs. Jones, hey, how did you hear about us today? Oh, I got this Valpak ad. Oh, I love that. We have this discount plus that, promotion. Oh, our customers have really loved that, financing option, XYZ, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. You don't have to dive into it. You don't have to make them uncomfortable. You're just planting a seed. So within the first 2 minutes of meeting Mr. and Mrs. Jones, you can plant that seed for financing.
I think too, that really ties to a lot of the stuff that I talk about with our customers with marketing, because you want consistency in your brand across your entire life cycle with a contact, with a customer. And I find it to personally be fairly galling if I'm getting to the end of a process, which the actual in-home sales appointment is the end of the process when it comes to conversion to a customer. I think we sometimes forget that as sales leaders sometimes kind of forget that because that's your whole life is that in-home sales appointment. But looking at this from a marketing perspective, that's my job is to see from the day we acquire that contact to the day that they refer us somebody. That's what I'm looking at. And that sales appointment's pretty far down. And if you're not getting your financing messaging out there early, you're sort of springing it on the customer late in the game.
Yeah.
And what are they going to think about that? Have you really set your rep up for success if you haven't put that messaging out there earlier that there are multiple ways to pay?
Yeah, I love that call out, Pam. I mean, it's Jennifer. She actually not coined the phrase, but she says all the time, in that scenario, if you're waiting to the end, you're using financing to potentially save the sale. And if you're doing that, does it work sometimes? Sure, but most likely not, right? You're gonna fail way more than you are if you don't bring it up earlier. So
Yeah, it definitely, I know Jen says this all the time, early and often. She's like, we need to bring it up earlier. I talk to Jen all the time. I love her.
yeah,
But we need to make sure that we are having these conversations as early as possible to help the homeowner get into the right solution for them.
yeah.
So I have heard mixed things in this industry when it comes to the percentage of homeowners who are actually taking advantage of these offers, taking advantage
Yeah.
of financing as an option. I hear from some businesses that have a big share of their customers are using financing. And then I hear from others who are like, nah, no one uses it. We just, most of it's just cash or credit card. And I want to know from you, Justin, like when we get to this idea of what percentage of homeowners are even offered this, like, can you talk to us about the importance of knowing your number and like what that indicates about your business?
Absolutely. And this is actually a trick question. So I will start with your question and lead
Great.
into this. So industry best practices is going to be anywhere from 50% minimally, and plus. So when I was at Tundra Line Home Improvement running the financing, and we had several renewal by Andersons, a jacuzzi bathroom program. We were averaging 70% of our projects being financed.
Wow.
And to put that into perspective, at our peak of all of our brands, we were gross sales of $150 million. So that's a lot of financing that we were doing as a whole.
Hmm.
And the amount of money we spent on marketing, we spoke to every variety of every customer out there, right? Cash customers, non-cash, and if you have that in your brain that, hey, my customers only pay cash, it's false. It's head trash. It is, even cash customers will utilize financing for many reasons. Whether it's I guess here's the thing. Even if you have a lot of cash in the bank, it's not that accessible sometimes. Sometimes you need to sell stock, you need to move it here, or you need to transfer from this account to another account, and it can actually create enough barriers where maybe I'm going to put this off to the next year, or maybe I'll think about it now because I don't want to go through the hassle of calling my bank, or maybe you don't like whatever the scenarios are. So in that scenario, you could offer them a same as cash, whether it's a deferred interest, deferred payment for 6 to 24 months, whatever it is, and you could give them an easier path to move forward just by doing
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
So that helps answer your question. So minimally, I would shoot for 50%. I would try to get as close to 70, 80 as much as you can.
So
So
how do
what's
you, I have a question on top of that.
yeah,
So when we're thinking about assessing our team, like if you're this owner who's still selling, like how many people are being offered financing, like that information. But if you're a sales manager who's got a team out in the field, like you're not riding along in every appointment. That would be insanity. So like how do you go about helping your customers to assess the number of homeowners who are even offered these choices? Like what tools are you using to figure that out?
yeah, and it's a great question. So I mean, we can use there's some ride along softwares that you can do to be able to have that so they can hear those keywords whether any sort of financing terms are mentioned. I mean, if
Mm-hmm.
you utilize our slides inside of Ingage, you can see how long they're sitting on those slides and
Mm-hmm.
actually walking through some of those precursor questions. So those are two easy metrics for outside of, let's say, your own CRM. So when
Mm-hmm.
a sales rep dispositions the appointment, and whether most likely it's going to be easier if it's a sale because you're going to disposition, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, it's a closed one project, and the way they're paying for it is, half cash, half finance, so you
Mm-hmm.
can track it there, right? Now, what's interesting is another thing to look at. is let's say you have a sales reps who's really good at offering financing, but they have a really high cancellation rate.
Ooh.
So what's interesting about that is, yes, they're bringing up financing. Yes, they're talking financing, but maybe they're not diving a couple layers deeper in that conversation to get the right financing option for them. So I've noticed with some of my previous reps, they were really high closing ratio, were really good offering financing and actually converting financing, but they had a super high cancellation rate. So we dug a little bit deeper. I looked at all what type of plans they were offering. So, and it turned out they were offering a lot of promo plans, which promo plans are great. I love promo plans. There's a ton of use for them. Where sometimes a promo plan's not right for a customer is maybe they can't afford that final payment inside that period. So it creates a little FUD with that customer. They start to doubt, why did I move forward with this project? I can't afford it. So you want to make sure you are offering the right type of financing options for that customer.
Now I know what FUD means. Can you tell our audience what FUD is? I know it's a term you and Jen use a lot.
Yes, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Right.
So
So
the
that's
enemy of a good sales close.
100%.
Yeah, so
Yes,
we
it's
want to
buyer's remorse all over.
yeah,
So
we want to avoid that at all costs. So I think that it's really important to know as an owner or as a sales leader, like how do you even get this information to know like what percentage of your homeowners are being offered it, what percentage of your reps are actually doing what you've asked them to do. It can be hard. Like that alone, I think can be a really big challenge for a sales leader who's like, I want to make my business better. I want to increase our financing rate. I want to have more customers buying on financing. But if I don't have some of these tools in place, like how do I get that information? It's really important to know like the CRM should have a lot of this data. It should have close reasons, like I know this as somebody who manages our own CRM. Like sometimes you got to go back and be like, hey, why was this close lost? Why was this close won? Like be sure you put that extra layer of information in so that way we know and we can use that data to be better.
yes. Yeah, 100%. And I'm just as guilty as, I'm still a salesperson at heart and do a lot of calls today. And I'm not the best at notes. So
Yeah.
shame on me as well. To layer on top of that really quick, if you're a sales manager and you're not utilizing a software where you're listening to the calls, do it the old fashioned way and sit and go on a ride along.
Mm-hmm.
Sit with your sales rep and be a fly on the wall and just make sure they're following your process, but mentioning financing. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think homeowner surveys too are another really good tool that we don't always talk about as much, which is like, are you talking to the people who bought from you or who didn't buy from you? Are you surveying them to find out, what was their experience like? I think that, yes, it's anecdotal data that comes back to you because everybody remembers things differently, but it's data.
yeah, we used to. I mean, we used to survey our customers all the time, both
Mm.
sides of it. And I remember we did at Tundraline, we did a exercise where we broke our leadership team broke up into teams, and we had to call 10 customers who bought, and we also had to call 10 customers who didn't buy, and ask
Mm.
all those questions, and it was fascinating what we found.
You'll learn a lot when you talk to your customers.
Yeah. We
So
might have
let's
changed a few processes around after hearing that.
Well, that is a perfect pivot. I want to talk about process. And so, can you talk about how you go about assessing the process for offering financing? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, that trick question to bring that back that'll tie into this is what percentage of your customers are being offered financing? The only right answer is 100%. You
Mm.
need to offer it's fair lending. It's plain and
Mhm.
simple. And if you don't do that, you actually can get fined, and it's a pretty hefty fine if you're
We
not
don't want
offering
that.
everybody. No, and your homeowners don't want that. Even people
No.
who say cash, they still want financing, or at least offer it to them. So going back to that great question of, do you have a process? So going back to my days at Tundraland, I had some really great conversations with sales leaders. And when I first started, we were only financing like 45 to 50%. And I knew there was a massive opportunity for us to get that to be better. So I challenged a lot of people who are now on my team, which is super fun. But hey, how do we get that number up? And I said, we need to bring up, I looked at our sales model, worked with it together, and I'm like, we need to bring it up here in the sales model. And like, no way, it's going to scare the customers. It's going to do this. And I'm like, we went back and forth and we did settle on a very happy medium. And
Mhm.
so with that, to go along with how do you offer financing as a process? So it starts all the way from the beginning of, do you have it on your website that you have financing? Are you marketing it? So that's check one. Step two. Step three is, no matter what your sales model is, everybody's is a little bit different. They're all pretty much the same, but there's some different nuances to it. So for instance, for what we did is we would do a quick like 4-question survey for the customer, just a questionnaire like, hey, why do you have us out here? What's the problem? Like things like that before we do any needs analysis or anything like that. And before we would go walk around, we would ask a quick question, be like, hey, Pam, real quick, our customers move forward with our projects a few different ways. Some like to write us a check, put it on a, credit card. Some take a hybrid approach where they're, doing half that way and half with our financing, and some like to fully financed. Which bucket do you think you might fall into? And just stop there. If they answer, great. If not, you're still planting that seed that you're going to talk about financing. And also bonus, you're letting them know that other people move forward with your projects. So it's okay for them to move forward with your
Mhm.
project too, right?
Yes, we love that social proof.
Exactly. FOMO is a real thing and it's a good thing. So,
Mhm.
and then throughout you touched on it earlier, throughout, you want to be price conditioning. You can price condition with big numbers, or you can also price condition, oh, typically a project like this is $100 to $200 a month or, whatever. So you can slide in there, and then when it comes time to build a project and show the overall number, always show a payment option. You
Mhm.
know, you can show a low APR, you can show a low APR with a longer term payment, you can show a same as cash option. Regardless, you always want to have that. Best practices is give them 3 options. Hey, Miss Jones, you can do it half now, half upon completion. You can take advantage of our same as cash, or you can take advantage of our monthly payments that's going to range between blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah.
Mhm.
How do you want to move forward? I guess that's really the process. It's just as long as you kind of hit all those.
Yeah, well, I think that what's so interesting about that is we know our customers have a lot of different sales methodologies in their business. They work with different sales coaches. Maybe they came up through specific types of coaching processes. I know you guys are fairly agnostic with who you work with. So are we. We like to be Switzerland here. I'm like, we'll help anybody because
Yeah,
that's our firm philosophy. And so what you just talked about with assessing your process for offering financing can be layered on top of any in-home sales methodology. You're not asking people to throw out their process that works for them. You're creating an additive experience. You're adding maybe an extra question here or there or an extra piece of visual content to help the customer when it comes to presenting price, presenting payment. And so I think that's really important is when you're assessing your process for offering financing, you have to kind of dig into that in-home sales process to understand what we're looking at.
yeah, I love that. And some social proof, if you want to call it that. We started working with a group where they were a $30 million business. They actually sold their business to private equity, so they hit all the metrics, right? They
Very
were
exciting. Yeah.
right. They were closing at 38%. Average ticket was 22.
Mhm.
The negative thing I'll say about their business, they were only financing 8% of their jobs, which is
Wow.
insane to me.
That's very low. Yeah.
So by walking them through that exact process, they're
Mhm.
now financing 50% of their projects,
Wow.
and their average ticket went up by like $3,000. Their closing percentage went up by 10 points
Wow.
or 10%, and they added $6 million to their bottom line just by adding those 4 little things to their process.
Wow. So you talked a little bit as you were going through the process about rates and payments and that sort of stuff. I don't know anything about having like, about why it matters if your team is focused on rates or payments. This means very little to me. Can you help it mean something to me? Can you tell me how, like, first of all, why are you asking this question? And secondly, what does it mean? What does the answer mean?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I actually my old back, I started in home improvement. I left for a while, went to the mortgage business,
Hmm.
and I would never give somebody an interest rate until I actually knew their profile, right? We pulled their
Hmm.
credit, went through everything, like, oh, you qualify for this rate. These are your options, right?
Hmm.
So when it comes to the home improvement financing buying process, you actually kind of have to give a little bit in order to get them to the closing table. So you almost have to like say, hey, your interest rate could be this, Mr. and Mrs. or Pam, right?
Hmm.
So let's fill out the application and see, and where you can run into some issues is, let's say somebody's credit is good but not great, so they're still going to qualify, but maybe they're not going to get that interest rate to what you quoted.
Hmm.
So it can lead to a very uncomfortable situation,
Yeah.
especially for, when I was running financing for Tundraland, to reference that, I did a lot of that second look and third look and,
Hmm.
trying to find some solutions to get people to move forward. And, I had some really uncomfortable conversations, right? They were told they were going to get a 6.99 interest rate. And I thought I'm a hero because I was able to get them approved because maybe they are in a really rough situation.
Hmm.
And let's say I mean, today would be like a 17.9 interest rate. So that's a big jump, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot different.
Yeah. So it can lead to a very uncomfortable conversation. It can lead to a really poor buying experience, lead to a poor rep experience.
Hmm.
So the biggest thing I want to point out here is, if you're going to talk interest rate, great, but give a range, right?
Hmm.
So like, hey, the interest rates start at this, but Pam, it's all dependent on your credit profile.
Hmm.
So let's go shopping to see what we can get you qualified for, right? So that's one way to look at it. Otherwise, take rates out of the conversation and say, hey, Pam, best case scenario, your monthly payment can be as low as $150. Worst case scenario, it's going to be $250, right?
Hmm.
So as long as you know what those two payment factors are, build them into your pricing tool and always show a range. So that way, if they do get a 17.9 interest rate, it's not a big deal because they already agreed to that higher payment. So
Hmm.
it should, I mean, rates always matter, don't get me wrong, but it should make that conversation easier. And if you get any pushback, all you have to do is, hey, Pam, tell me again, why do you want to get these windows replaced? You said it's really bad for Johnny and Susie's room because of the mold. You really want to get that fixed. Well, this is a great way to get that taken care of, right? So you can go back to the needs, why they need it, and then tie it all together. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does make sense to me. I mean, I think too, interest rates can sometimes be this nebulous thing. Like we know that the interest rate is there, but I think if you asked a lot of people to explain the difference between simple and compound interest, they'd be like, yeah, whatever, and just kind of like walk away from you. And so I think, but payments are a much more
Hmm.
accessible tool. Like I think everybody understands, what a monthly payment means for their budget.
Yeah.
So you're also like being able to speak to both and being able to provide a range on both really provides it's an accessible way to have a conversation about financing with somebody who maybe doesn't really care that much about the concept of an interest rate. They just want to get their project done. Or yeah, is in that kind of uncomfortable situation where their approval would come back with something different than they were expecting.
Yeah, and even speaking of the compound simple interest, it's a great point. The on average, even if you did like a 15-year loan, the 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 average of these loans actually stay a loan is like 4.5 years, right?
Hmm.
So if the average person is paying that loan off in 4.5 years, even if they have a 17.9 interest rate, it's really not going to be 17.99 when that
Hmm.
loan is said and done. So if you make extra payments, pay the loan down faster, that interest rate actually goes down.
Yeah.
So to both of our points, just focus on the payments.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the best for you and the homeowner.
So let's move on to the last question of this diagnostic assessment, which is, do you have the cost of financing built into your everyday rates? I have no clue what that means, Justin. Can you tell me what that means and what we're looking to get out of that question?
Sadly, a lot of other people out there don't, right?
Great, I'm not alone.
So this is how do I put this? So I encourage everybody that's listening to look at financing as a cost of doing business. So much like you purchasing nails, materials, anything like that for your projects, look at financing the same way. So you're building all those different things into the cost. You're building marketing into there. You're building your sales reps commission. You're building your commission. All that is being built into your price you're going to show Mr. and Mrs. Jones. So you should look at financing the same way and not penalize your sales reps who are selling financing, because typically with financing in this space, there's going to be a cost to do business because they're all unsecured loans. So it's not like buying a car where if you stop making the payments, the bank can come and take that car away. So these lenders aren't going to come and take your shower out or take your siding off the walls or anything like that. So when you offer financing in unsecured space, some of the loans are free, where there is no cost to that, but some of them do come with a cost, right? And it's okay to pay for financing because you're going to have more options that are going to be more attractive for Mr. and Mrs. Jones to move forward with, right? So, for instance, simple math, and you also want to factor in whatever your credit card processing is. And the goal with this is so you can show one transparent price to the consumer, and you can say, hey, there's 3 ways to move forward. This is great news, right? You can either put it on a credit card or give us a check. You can put it on the same as cash, or you can do a payment options. Which one is the easiest for you? So some companies will penalize their sales reps for picking that option that has cost associated with it, which it's kind of counterintuitive because there's obviously we talked about earlier, and there's a ton of data that shows if you offer financing, you will get higher closing percentages, bigger ticket items. Everybody makes more money. So we shouldn't penalize sales reps.
Yeah.
So where I'm eventually going with this, I feel like this is a long-winded story, but you want to build in the cost. So there's a simple math, and I can share it afterwards, but basically what you want to do is take whatever your average cost for financing is, right? Let's say it's 8%. And you want to take your credit cards, let's just for simple math, it's 3%. So you want to look at your overall sold jobs. You want to look at what percentage were just like a check, what percentage were finance, and what percentage were on a credit card. So then you want to take those numbers and the math formula, and you add them all up. And this is in this one because I cheated because it's, let's say you're doing 50, 30, 10. It's going to come right around like 4.3 or 4.4%. So what you want to do at that point is I would recommend is take a 5% price increase across the board.
Okay.
And 5% is not going to make your customers not move forward. It's not going to mess with your sales reps' heads. It's just going to make their job easier. Just build it in and everybody wins, if that makes sense.
That does actually make sense to me. I now know what you were talking about. Yay, I feel smarter now. So
yes, mission accomplished.
To recap our program checkup, we want to first ask, are you marketing the financing options available? Second, what percentage of homeowners are offered financing, payment options, or affordability? It should be 100%, as Justin told us. Otherwise, you could face fines. Don't get fined. Offer it to everybody. Number 3, we want to ask, do you have a process for offering financing? Number 4, is your team focused on rates or payments? And number 5, do you have the cost of financing built into your everyday rates? And if you're honest at the end of all of this, it should really give you an idea of what tweaks you need to make to your business, correct?
Absolutely.
So thank you, Justin, for being here. And thank you to everybody for attending today. We'll see you here next time.